Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for those of us who are joining from overseas. I'd like to begin today's session by acknowledging that I am on the country of the Wangal people of the Eora Nation and that sovereignty was never ceded. I would also like to pay my respect to the First Peoples from where Dante is joining us today. My name is Joel Murray, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm ACON's Manager of Community Health Programs. I've got a visual description of myself for people who are blind and vision impaired. I'm a white non-binary person with curly hair past my shoulders. I'm wearing glasses and a black t-shirt. I'd like to introduce my guest today, who is Dante Alancastre, who's a documentary filmmaker with over 15 years experience and is the director and producer of AIDS Diva, The Legend of Connie Norman, which is part of Queer Screen Film Fest, which is running from the 16th to the 26th of September, on demand nationally, queerscreen.org.au. Welcome, Dante.
Hi, Joel. Hi, everyone in Australia and elsewhere where they're watching. I'm sitting here in a hot afternoon in Los Angeles. And so if you see me sweat, it's not because of the questions, it's because of the heat. So I'm very happy to be screening again in Down Under. I was hoping, when we got selected to finally go visit, but COVID had other plans for us. So I'm just sitting here and meeting you guys virtually.
Well, I'm really grateful that you were able to join us despite the global health pandemic at the moment. All right, so maybe we could get into some of the questions. On your LinkedIn profile, you describe yourself as a cultural bearer. This is a term that I haven't heard before today. So would you like to tell me a little bit about what this means?
Well, doing this project has really, because we go back in time, when I was in my 20s and just coming out, and I met a lot of Connie's friends who, they question themselves why I survived and she didn't, or other lovers and friends that passed away. And I never thought of that myself as a survivor or, a cultural bearer. But I think we're here, especially the storytellers, and I mean storytellers in any medium. We're here to bear witness to the culture that, that past, the present, and the future. And I think working on AIDS Diva really made me realize that I'm talking for all those kids, because they were kids, youth, and young men, women, trans women, trans men, who are no longer here to share their story, to have a voice. And I'm documenting them and making them visible once again. So their legacy and their life sacrifices are not going to be forgotten. So that's what I mean about the culture of bearing. Yeah. Wonderful. And also because I'm intersectional. I'm not only a storyteller. I live in LA, but I'm also an immigrant. I'm Latinx. I'm gay, I'm queer, a person of color. And like I said, I survived that pandemic, and I'm surviving this pandemic. So I think we are the storytellers, like the shamans used to be in the past. We're telling the stories with the new technology, which is film, and we can show it in person or we can show it virtually. So I'm very conscious of my responsibility of living in my community, because all the stories, as you saw in my LinkedIn, probably are about my community, the one I'm living in. I'm inspired by them. So that's the stories I tell.
This is an excellent segue actually into my next question. So much of your work is about the representation of Latinx and trans people around the globe. So can you tell me about why these communities are the center of your work?
Well, I've always been a storyteller. I started way back when I was in college, and I was a pre-med at Columbia in Manhattan. And in my junior year, I told my mother, I said, "Mom, I don't think I can be a doctor. I know you're a nurse, but I don't like hospitals. I don't like blood. I don't like any of that." And and she's the one that actually took me to the theater, to Broadway, and to the movies since I was very little, 5, 6 years old. I remember sitting in the cinema all dark and be fascinated by it. So I said, I want to be an artist. And of course, coming from an immigrant background is like an artist, you're going to be starving to death all your life. It's not like being an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, which was expected of me. But she supported me, well, she was disgruntled, but then she supported me. And I think, it's when I came to, after many years of doing theater, I moved to Amsterdam to live with a partner. I met my first I call this woman of trans experience. And she was my colleague, and we had a great time together. And we never talked about transitioning and all of that. I just had that experience with her as being really integral part of the team that we had formed doing a cable show. So when that relationship ended and I wound up going back to Peru, I wanted to make a film actually back then of homophobia and closet and all of that. But nobody wanted to talk to me, at least not on camera. And a friend of mine who was an activist said, well, I know somebody who might want to talk to you. It's Gabriela. And he didn't say anything about Gabriela. When I met Gabriela, she was a woman around, also of trans experience, around my age. And she was there, and we spent 3 hours talking, and she told me about her life from beginning to that moment. And I just had this realization that I have more in common with her than with a lot of, at least the gay men in Peru. I mean, I left Peru when I was 13, so I couldn't have that much in common with them. But we, they were all closeted and in fear, and she was not. She was fearless. And she didn't even know how I was gonna use her story. And then she introduced me to some of her friends, and that became my first film, which came out in 2007, called En el Fuego. It was a short 4-minute documentary about her friends who were activists, who were women who were still doing, some of them, sex work, but they were trying to make a better life for themselves, even at their own risk, because even right now they don't even have protections like we do here in the States. But she just had to live her authentic life. And I felt like with all the privileges I've ever had, if I can continue to tell the stories to move the needle forward, I will do that. And that's what I've been doing ever since. Now, just when I brought that film to LA, it was new to the zeitgeist here. I mean, most of the documentaries back then were about surgery, about beautiful, showgirls, and this was about just living your life. They had no assumptions that their life are going to get any better unless they put their bodies on the line, and that's what they were doing in Peru. So a lot of the activists here who got really interested, and they basically invited me in. They embraced me into their community, to the Transgender Day of Remembrance, where I met Valerie Spencer, who's in Connie's film, and Bambi Salcedo, and some of the really, the leaders that we have right now really took me in because they know I was intentional and I was mindful and I was respectful, and I was going to be telling their stories in such a manner.
Beautiful. Thanks, Dante. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the film that we're here to talk about today, AIDS Diva. As a trans person living with HIV, I found that the film spoke to me on so many levels. I wanted to ask why Connie Norman, but then that's kind of obvious for anyone who's seen the film. So I guess I want to hear about your relationship to Connie and how she became the subject of your film.
Well, full disclosure, I've only been living in LA for 14 years. So I never met Connie. My co-producer, John Johnston, actually did meet Connie in one of the early demonstrations, which are in the film in 89 at the USC, where they were fighting to get an AIDS ward at a local public hospital. And he met her, and I love that story because it just really shows what kind of person Connie was. It was called for LA in January, and I guess he was looking like he was cold, and Connie went to her tent because it was a week-long vigil. She went to her tent and brought him her coat, which was returned, by the way. I'm always asking, I hope you return her coat. Because they were staying there overnight. And just that, that just tells you a lot about her. The way I got into, all the films I've made, they start from some gut feeling that I need to tell the story, my community needs to hear the story. And that happened with Connie 4 years ago. I was sitting actually at the screening of my previous film, which I was a trans teenager and her single mom, Ophelia, raising Zoe. And somebody tapped me in the back and said, "Oh, Dante, what are you doing next?" I'm like, "Oh, please don't ask me that question. Let me enjoy my finishing this project." And he said, "What do you make a film about Connie Norman?" She was a friend of mine from ACT UP LA. And I was like, Connie Norman? I heard that name before. They used to give here, the trans community used to give an award on her name. And one of the people that I had made a film on before, years ago, Bambi Salcedo, I remember going to her place and there was a plaque that says, "This is the Connie Norman Award for Trans Longevity and Excellence in the Community." And I thought, let me see. Back then, the only thing I had of her person was, I seen a poster of her that was all in pink. They used to do back then during the HIV/AIDS activist era. And you saw her afro, and that's all I saw in her glasses. So I thought, she looks like a little bit like Angela Davis. She must be African American. And her friend laughed at me and said, "No, she was from Texas." She was this. So anyway, so that started the digging, because there was very little of her around. And I saw the video of her with Bolly George. And then I saw the one when she's wearing the red sweater, when she's being totally calm, cool, and collected. And I thought, what? How can she be these two different, polar opposites? She was so smart, and, she's talking her own agency, and then she can be so fiery and standing up, for herself in such a combative situation. And I thought, well, if we can find more of that she's speaking in her own words, which I think is what really makes the film unique. Because after that, I looked into Facebook. They had just started an ACT UP LA Facebook page, and I sought out the people who were running, and I said, "Did you guys know Connie Norman?" And it was like floodgates. Just everybody had some experience with Connie Norman.
Wow. And
luckily, her best friend, Peter Cashman, who you saw in the film, was a broadcaster, Australian. He's Australian, actually. You heard the accent.
Yeah, on that.
He is Australian. He's not was. He's still around. He lives here in Pasadena. And he said, "Oh, Dante, I have all these, VHS tapes of Connie. I used to follow her around." And lo and behold, he used to follow her around everywhere she went. Not only when she was getting arrested or demonstrations, or when she was in Sacramento, she went We also had videotapes of her in Kauai, fishing trips, he had tapes of it, and he just said to me, "I don't know what's in this tape, but you can have them." So that's how the beginning of the journey began. All those tapes that we save and we don't know what's in them, they might have treasures in them. So please digitize them. They get spoiled after a while. After 20 years, 25 years of you not watching it, they get all moisture, and you're losing a lot of your friends and a lot of your history. So please be aware of that.
Well, I mean, I think it's just delightful that you were able to, discover that footage, because after I saw the film, I thought, well, why the hell haven't I heard about Connie before? And, it's great to hear that, other people, that her legacy was so well known among her community members.
Yeah.
So I guess many of our younger generation of queer and trans people don't have that personal connection to the activism and anguish of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And with the advancement of biomedical prevention, which means people with HIV with undetectable viral loads can't pass on HIV, and other enhanced HIV prevention methods, I guess, why is it important for the younger generation to reflect and understand the important activism and activists that came before them, particularly people like Connie?
Well, I have had the privilege of showing the film as previews many times before. We had our first in-person at Outfest about a little over 3 weeks ago. So it was the first time I had the film totally finished with all bells and whistles, and we had an audience, a big audience actually, and getting the audience's reactions of people who probably didn't even know Connie. I mean, but about before COVID, right before COVID, we had a test screening in Dallas to a group of young people. Everybody was at least under 30. I think there were only 2 people who were around my age. And I was really nervous because I thought this is going to be totally turned off. I mean, I know it's only an hour film, but I mean, are they going to get it? Are they going to get her importance? Are they going to be bored? Are they going to say this has nothing to do with me? And it was the opposite. People were crying. People were saying to me, how come, like you were saying, how come I never heard of her? How come, her gender journey really validates me? I could show this to my parents and say what non-binary is, what gender non-conforming is, because this woman was struggling with that. She was constantly learning and not just staying in the binary that she was raised in. She was learning from the Mahus, from the Berdage. When she went to Kauai, she was commingling with the Two Spirits. And this is something that was an eye-opening to the kids, the youth that was there, and like and in terms of the activism, like she says in the film, I was there to organize everybody. I was just not fitting into some table and being quiet and just being a number or identity. I organized everybody. I did the work, and I think that's one of the things that I like to see kids take away from it, that, to make changes, and we still need to make a lot of changes. I mean, here in America, we still have a lot of violence perpetrated, especially in the non-binary, trans, and gender non-conforming community. And it's not only because of the legislation, but it's also in deeds. It's also in not having enough jobs. There's violence that is perpetrated in so many forms, but we have to do the work, and we have to do it together. I'm teaching my own cis gay men and cis women, lesbians, that in the past we got together. I mean, lesbians were taking care of gay men back then, and that's how we were able to overcome and fight and get and get the medications that we needed. So this is not the first time we've been in this rodeo, but we have to do it with putting on the work, and trying, like she was, a bridge builder, and trying to work and understand each other, because unfortunately we don't live alone in an island, you know. I mean, I wish we did, you know, like in some place like Fire Island or something, but or some place like some mythological place, but we don't. Unfortunately, we still have legislators, we still have the patriarchy, you know, we still have the white supremacists, you know, all of that we have to constantly be vigilant of, and never fall on our, you know, on whatever gains that we had, because it can be taken right away. Look at the reproductive rights here in the States. Look how it's in peril right now, after years and years of people being confident that you can have control over your body. And it's not only about the women, because also in trans bodies, they're being, you know, so they're being, you know, so Connie will be all over that, because she was about, like you heard in her last moments, you have to be yourself. That's the only thing you can be, you know. And that's why I think the film will be timeless, will resonate, and will be, and it already has, at least with the critics, but now is the time for the audience to chime in. Thank you for all the comments that I see.
Yes, thanks.
You know, and you know, I love to go and visit you all and show the film in schools. I mean, I'm open to anything. You know, I'm getting my booster tomorrow. I'm ready to go anywhere. So yeah, I mean, fantastic. I continue to teach the Connie Norman gospel as long as I can. It's very meaningful to me.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you for giving us your time on your afternoon and our morning to have a chat about AIDS Diva. You know, I've seen the documentary film myself, so I encourage those in Australia to go to queerscreen.org.au and check out the AIDS Diva. So once again, thank you so much, Dante, not only for being with us here today, but for making this film. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film. And we're going to throw to the trailer to encourage, just in case you needed more reasons to tune in and see it.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you for all the work that you do. I read also your LinkedIn profile, and I hope we can continue to have this conversation beyond the festival. And thank you to all the beautiful people down there. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of each other, because that's what Connie and I would have loved.
Thank you so much, Dante.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you, everyone who's tuned.
Connie used every possible tool to amplify her messages. I mean, I imagine she would have 1 million Twitter followers today.
I'm going to be talking about it with the rich heritage and the culture of the gay and lesbian community.
She was very caring. She was extremely funny.
Why is it that heterosexuals have lives and gay and lesbian people have lifestyle?
Right
I
on.
think it's queer lives, honey.
And she was very angry.
That was the night when we had experienced the most extreme betrayal by the governor of this state, and under those circumstances, I can understand.
The quality that she had that was so distinctive and that got to people was her honesty. Just blatant honesty.
We have sensationalized the issues of AIDS because it's connected to our sexuality as human beings. And we've done a lot of finger pointing. I want to take some of the finger pointing away.
Connie had to learn the language of government, the language of bureaucracy, the language of regulation, the language of lawyers and doctors and healthcare workers in order to communicate with them as somebody living with HIV and AIDS.
Connie was just relentless in fighting for future generations.
To my congressman, I would say you vote wrong and you won't win again if you don't start showing some leadership.
There is a link through time between social movements for progressive change.
She would get a hoot out of who we are today. We are now kick-ass bitches because of Connie. I know it's a big crowd, but I need all the drag queens, all the butch dykes, all the leather dudes and leather dudettes that can get up here to get up here. Listen up, Pete. I am a transsexual with HIV disease. I'm an ex-drag queen, ex-drug addict. I get it, I got it, and I'm dealing with it.